Have you ever thought that a simple act of kindness could change the course of your life? I'm not talking about a grand deed, the kind that makes headlines, but something seemingly small, almost invisible to the world's hurried eyes. A simple gesture, like sharing a piece of bread, offering help in silence, or giving something you yourself would need, but choose to give to someone who needs it more. Have you ever caught yourself reflecting on this? We often walk through life without realizing that these discrete choices can open paths we never imagined. And that's exactly what makes the story you're about to hear today so special and so necessary. Imagine a teacher, tired after another day of work, living a tight routine, marked by bills that barely make ends meet, yet still carrying in her heart the flame of compassion. She didn't have much, almost nothing beyond her own willpower, but what she had, she shared. At the school where she worked, surrounded by children who bore the brunt of an unequal world, she saw more than just students. She saw stories, hidden pain, looks that cried out for care. And it was precisely this sensitivity that led her to star in a moment that no one in that school would forget. One day, she noticed a boy sitting at her desk, head down, his stomach growling silently. Most wouldn't notice, but the teacher's attentive heart caught the detail. Perhaps because she herself had experienced hunger at some point, perhaps because she recognized in that child a reflection of herself. Without hesitation, she opened her bag and took out what was left of her lunch, a simple snack, which would be her only meal until she got home. She placed it in the boy's hands, not with words of charity, but with a look that said, "You are not alone." This small gesture, this genuine act of kindness, carried much more than nourishment. It was a seed planted in fertile ground, capable of bearing fruit no one could have predicted. Have you ever been there? Have you ever given something of yourself when you seem to have nothing to give? It's curious how life organizes itself to surprise us when we make room for generosity. Sometimes we believe we're simply helping someone, but without knowing it, we're writing chapters that will also change our own trajectory. This poor teacher, with her routine of sacrifices, never imagined that her actions would be just the beginning of an exciting turn of events. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because behind that child lay a story that carried not only hardships, but also an unexpected revelation. And when the student's father showed up at school, what seemed like just another ordinary day took on the contours of destiny, the kind that makes us believe nothing happens by chance. This introduction isn't just about a student's hunger or a snack donation. It's about transformation, about mindset, about choices that seem small but conceal a hidden truth. Life gives back just as much as we give. A phrase you've probably heard says, "Those who sow kindness reap miracles." But here you'll see this maxim come to fruition in a real and surprising way. Stay with me until the end, because every detail of this story will move you in unexpected ways. As you delve deeper into this story, you might begin to reflect on how many times you've rushed through similar situations without realizing you could be the protagonist of a significant change in someone's life. Perhaps you'll discover that generosity, even in the midst of hardship, has a greater impact than we imagine. Now, I want to take you even deeper into this journey to show you what really happened after this simple gesture and why the student's father's words left everyone silent. And when we hear a story like this, it's impossible not to put ourselves in their shoes. Maybe you've experienced something similar, witnessed a simple gesture that changed everything, or even been the person who decided to act when no one else would. This is the kind of memory that carries enormous power because it shows us that even amidst difficulties, there is room for empathy, solidarity, and courage. And that's exactly why I want to open this space here with you. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what's touched you most so far. Your experience and insight may inspire someone else reading this. Each comment becomes part of this invisible support network we're creating together. And do you know why it's also important to like and subscribe to the channel? Because that's what keeps this kind of message reaching more people who need to hear something like it. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content, reinforcing this cycle of positive impact. So take advantage of this moment and share in the comments what detail of this story touched you most. This gesture of interaction isn't just a click. It's a sign that we're connected by values that still resonate in today's world. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. She woke every day before sunrise, not because she had energy to spare, but because she knew her routine demanded every minute. The simple house where she lived was quiet, but the empty refrigerator was a constant reminder of her financial hardships. Still, she found reasons to smile. A public school teacher, she earned little, barely enough to cover her own needs, but she never let scarcity dim the brilliance of her dedication. On the contrary, it was precisely there, in the space between the little she had and the much she gave, that her true greatness was born. Her students saw her as special, not because she offered magical solutions, but because she knew how to listen. In the classroom, her words went beyond the content of the lessons. They were seeds of hope. She believed that every child carried a future that could be shaped, and this belief was stronger than any hardship. Her love for her profession was what sustained her, even when her salary barely covered rent or materials. To many, it seemed foolish to dedicate so much for so little. For her, it was a life choice, a decision that brought meaning, even amidst trials. There were days when fatigue weighed heavily. Walking miles to school, sometimes without money for transportation, was a constant challenge. Still, she arrived at the classroom with an erect posture, a discreet smile, and eyes that revealed empathy. The students sensed there was something different about her. She wasn't just a teacher, she was someone who genuinely cared, and that made all the difference. Life had given her little in material terms, but an abundance in humanity. It was common for her to bring simple lunches, prepared with whatever was left at home. Often more rice than meat, more hope than resources. Still, he never complained. On the contrary, he saw it as a symbol of resilience and discipline. Each spoonful represented not only her own survival, but also her choice to remain steadfast in the face of life's harshness. The curious thing is that even with so little, she still found ways to share. It was as if he understood that true wealth lies not in what you keep, but in what you give. This mindset made her a silent example. Her co-workers admired her, some secretly, others openly. After all, it's not easy to maintain faith in one's purpose when everything around seems to be falling apart. But she did it. And her strength came not from external factors, but from within, from a deep conviction that small gestures can change lives. This hidden truth, which many ignore in the rush of everyday life, was the essence that guided each of her decisions. The students, no matter how young, felt this difference. Children sense when someone truly cares about them, treats them with dignity, and believes in them. And this had a direct impact. Boys and girls who had arrived unmotivated began to work harder, believing they could achieve something greater. The teacher, without realizing it, became not just an educator, but a bridge of transformation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the way she dealt with her own limitations reveals something that directly affects us all. To what extent are we capable of putting others above our own needs? This reflection gains strength when we understand how empathy, even in situations of scarcity, can become a revolutionary act. He arrived, at the classroom like any other day, but a closer look revealed something was wrong. His uniform, already worn with age, hung loosely on his small frame, betraying a lack of care that came not by choice, but by scarcity at home. His shoes, with worn soles and a small hole in the side, gave a silent signal that this boy faced greater difficulties than most of his classmates could imagine. But what caught the most attention wasn't the objects, but his eyes. There was a mixture of sadness and weariness in them, as if the weight of a hard life had arrived too soon. While the other children opened their lunchboxes and shared laughter in the hallways before class started, he remained quiet, watching from afar, trying to hide his discomfort. He didn't ask for anything, didn't complain, simply hid in his own shyness. The teacher, accustomed to reading what the eyes don't say, noticed something different about him, and it was in the details that the truth revealed itself. The trembling, hand supporting his face, the silent rumbling of his stomach, the slow movements that tried to mask his weakness. It was clear he had arrived at school without having eaten lunch. The teacher's heart sank. How many times had she witnessed similar stories? Children who, despite their innocence, carried the weight of a harsh and unforgiving reality on their shoulders. But there was something about that student that touched her in a special way. Perhaps it was the way he tried to hide his need, as if afraid of being seen, of being exposed. Or perhaps it was the contrast between his physical fragility and the silent strength that seemed to resist within him. The fact is, the scene did not go unnoticed, and the certainty began to grow in her mind that she could not simply ignore what was before her eyes. The school environment, which should be a refuge and a space for learning, sometimes became the stage for harsh revelations. There, amid the noise of the children, lay a hidden truth. Inequality is not just a distant concept, but something that manifests itself in the faces, gestures, and even in the silence of the little ones. And faced with this contrast, the teacher understood that her mission went beyond teaching math, reading, or science. It was also about seeing the human hidden behind the grades, about having the sensitivity to perceive that behind each student there is a story, a journey marked by behind-the-scenes details that rarely come to light. She knew that a simple gesture could make a difference, perhaps a comforting word, perhaps a shared plate of food. It was the mindset of someone who understood that education isn't limited to books and tests, but extends to care, example, and the empathy that transforms. This realization brought forth a whirlwind of emotions, compassion, pain, but also determination. And it was at that moment that the decision to act began to blossom within her. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it's precisely in these moments that life confronts us with choices that reveal who we truly are. The teacher could have pretended not to see, could have gone on her way without getting involved, but she decided to listen to her heart's call. And this choice would pave the way for a sequence of events that would change not only that boy's day, but also her own life. The room was filled with the children's chatter, but to the teacher, the sound seemed distant. What occupied her mind was the image of the boy, head down, trying to hide the emptiness in his stomach as he pretended to write in his notebook. She knew what it was like to be hungry, knew the weight of having your body ask for something you couldn't give. Perhaps that's why the decision came without calculation or hesitation, to forego her own meal that day and place it before him. It was a silent gesture, but charged with meaning. She opened her bag, took out the simple package she carried, and handed it to the boy with a shy but tender smile. It took the boy a few seconds to believe it was real. His eyes, previously downcast and dull, lifted, revealing surprise and even a hint of fear, as if unsure if he deserved it. But all it took was a nod from the teacher, a firm, welcoming gaze, for him to understand. It wasn't charity, it was care, it was overflowing humanity. The moment seemed to freeze time. That piece of bread, that fruit, and the simple portion of food that would be her lunch became a banquet before the boy. He held it with trembling hands, as if afraid it would suddenly disappear. As he took the first bite, the sparkle in his eyes returned, and the silence gave way to a deep sigh of relief. It was as if, for a few moments, the weight he had been carrying had been lifted. For the teacher, it wasn't just about satisfying hunger. It was about sending a silent message that he wasn't alone, that there was someone who saw his pain and cared about his journey. The immediate impact was visible. The boy's posture changed, his heavy expression softened, and even his writing in his notebook seemed to come alive again. It was as if that simple gesture had opened the door to an invisible but powerful transformation. This episode, so inconspicuous to outsiders, held a hidden truth. Small acts of kindness have the power to become major milestones in the lives of those who receive them. The teacher didn't know if she would have anything for herself the next day, but she knew that in that moment, she had made the right choice. And this kind of decision isn't born of cold reason, but of empathy that overrides the instinct for self-preservation. It's the mindset of those who understand that sharing, even in times of scarcity, can have a much greater impact than keeping it to themselves. And perhaps the most impressive thing wasn't what she gave, but how she gave it. No speeches, no expectation of recognition, no awkwardness. Just a pure human gesture that connected two stories marked by loss, but which in that moment found a way to endure through affection. The teacher couldn't have imagined that this simple act would open a chain of revelations and twists that would change everything. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because when we look at situations like these, we realize that it's not just about physical hunger, but also about emotional hunger, the need to belong, the search for someone who sees and recognizes our worth. It's at this point that life often surprises us, revealing behind-the-scenes details that transform the way we view our own choices. He took the package with his small hands, almost unable to believe it was actually for him. For a moment, his eyes darted around the room, as if to make sure no one would snatch the food from his hands. It was a mixture of surprise and disbelief. And then, when he realized the gesture was sincere, his first reaction wasn't to rush to eat, but to hold on tightly, as if that piece of food held a greater value than simply satisfying his hunger. His shy gaze lifted to the teacher, and it was in that silent encounter that something profound happened. There were no immediate words. The child simply smiled in a restrained, almost embarrassed way, as if unsure if he deserved such kindness. But in that smile lay a universe of gratitude. It was the kind of expression that speaks louder than any sentence. The surrounding classmates might not have noticed, but for those who observed closely, it was impossible not to feel the impact of that moment. That small gesture had changed the mood of the room. It was as if suddenly a soft light had penetrated a space previously marked by routine and indifference. The boy took his first bite calmly, almost reverently, as if he didn't want to waste anything. The teacher, for her part, continued her work, but deep down her heart was heavy and yet warm. She knew that this simple act could have unseen consequences. Perhaps no one knew it at the time, but for the boy that gesture was a clear message. He was seen, he was important, his pain would not go unnoticed. And this kind of recognition has transformative power. Children who grow up in a state of lack often carry a heavy silence, a feeling of having no voice or place in the world. But when someone decides to break this cycle and offer something more than words, when there's action, when there's surrender, the effect goes far beyond a satisfied stomach. It boosts self-esteem, touches the soul, and opens doors to a different future. It's at this point that we realize how simple decisions can be the seeds of great revelations. That boy's reaction wasn't just to eat, it was to smile with his eyes, to give silent thanks, to reveal the hope that still existed within him, even hidden beneath layers of need. It was as if the teacher had lit a flame that time and scarcity had nearly extinguished. And it's impossible not to reflect on how often a gesture like that can change someone's trajectory. After all, we don't always know the story each person carries, but we have the opportunity to touch that story with empathetic choices. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what seemed like just a shared lunch revealed something bigger. The hidden truth that sometimes small gestures reveal big impacts and open paths to unexpected journeys that no one could have foreseen. Even when circumstances seemed overwhelming and life presented her with challenges that could have justified selfishness, the teacher remained steadfast in her essence. She lived with little, sometimes barely enough for herself, but she never allowed this scarcity to turn into hardness of heart. On the contrary, it was as if each hardship she faced was converted into greater empathy for others. There was a hidden truth in her way of life. She didn't act this way to be seen. She didn't seek recognition. She didn't expect rewards. Her care was silent, discreet, yet profound, and precisely for that reason, so impactful. Her classmates might have looked at her and seen only a tired woman in simple clothes, arriving early and leaving late from school. But behind the scenes of her routine, there was a greatness that few could perceive. She cared for every detail, as if each child were a part of her own family. It didn't matter if there was no applause or witnesses. She simply did it because she believed that this was the true meaning of her journey: to transform, even in small doses, the lives of those within her reach. And this mindset, born of genuine empathy, is what separates those who merely survive from those who leave their mark. His attitude was a powerful reminder that the greatest acts of kindness happen precisely when no one is watching, when there are no cameras or audience, when the decision is between one's own comfort and the well-being of others. The truth is that it was there, in the silence of everyday choices, that his essence revealed itself most clearly. By giving up her own food to offer to a student in need, she wasn't just satisfying a child's hunger, she was showing that dignity is built with small gestures. She was teaching, without words, that loving one's neighbor isn't just talk, but practice. This revelation has a huge impact when we stop to reflect, because it makes us think about how many times we've been in similar situations and chosen to look away, pretending not to see. She, even with so little, decided to see, to act, and that choice changes everything. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic because when we understand the root of this behavior, we realize that it's not just isolated kindness, but a silent transformation that can be contagious and inspiring to everyone. When the sun rose the next day, the school seemed like another ordinary morning. The sound of children running around the playground, notebooks being opened, the smell of chalk in the air. But for that teacher, there was something different in the air. The memory of the previous day's gesture was still fresh, and the image of that student with his eyes full of gratitude wouldn't leave her mind. She wasn't looking for anything in return, but within her was a sense of mission accomplished, as if she had planted an invisible seed in someone's heart. And unbeknownst to her, that seed would begin to germinate much faster than she expected. In the midst of that routine, when the gates had already closed for classes, a man appeared. His step was firm, but carried a noticeable tension. His gaze searched for something specific and soon found what he was looking for: the room where the teacher worked. He paused for a moment, looking out the window, as if gathering courage before entering. There was a mix of strength and fragility in his posture, something that immediately aroused the curiosity of those who saw him. Who was he? Just another father worried about his son? Or was there a hidden truth about to come to light? When the teacher looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, she couldn't imagine the impact that encounter would have on her life. At first, she thought he was just an ordinary father, perhaps wanting to talk about grades, behavior, or some school situation. But there was something about his presence that shattered that expectation. His silence felt heavier than any words, and as the children copied the lesson on the board, she felt that moment held a revelation. The man entered slowly, excusing himself with a discreet gesture. His face was weary, like someone who had lived through more battles than he cared to count. But at the same time, his eyes reflected a gleam that blended pride and pain, as if he carried within himself a scarred past and a journey marked by difficult choices. He looked at his son tenderly, then turned to the teacher. She remained calm, though inside she was overcome with curiosity. Who was this man? Why did his mere presence seem to carry so much weight? As he thanked her for the previous day's gesture, the meal she had offered the boy, his choked voice revealed more than words. It was as if, in speaking, he revealed fragments of a much larger story, full of unknown behind-the-scenes details. And in that moment, the teacher realized there was something beyond gratitude. There was a hidden secret, something beginning to emerge between the lines. Perhaps this father wasn't just an ordinary man trying to survive hardship. Perhaps his identity held a revelation capable of transforming the way she saw that student and even herself. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it is precisely in these unexpected encounters that life reveals hidden truths, showing that behind every face there is a journey, a silent impact that can surprise us at any moment. In that simple room, where the sound of chalk scratching the board was the predominant sound, the atmosphere suddenly changed. The student's father, who until then seemed just another man weary of life, let out a different weight in his words, something no one there could have anticipated. His eyes, firm but teary, revealed a hidden truth, a story beginning to emerge through the cracks of silence. He didn't speak, as someone simply thanking someone for a gesture of kindness. His voice carried the intensity of someone who had faced internal deserts and invisible battles. As the children continued their activities, oblivious to the profoundness of that moment, the teacher felt she was facing a revelation greater than she could have imagined. Every detail in his posture, the way he held his hands, his pent-up breathing, the way he looked at his son, held clues to a journey marked by difficult decisions and silent transformation. He wasn't just a father, he was someone who carried behind the scenes of his own life a narrative capable of shaking convictions and opening space for new understandings about courage, pain, and overcoming. He began to share fragments of his past, not as someone seeking compassion, but as someone finally finding a willing ear to listen. He spoke of falls, of choices that had separated him from everything he loved, of a time when he saw himself as a lost man. But he also spoke of decisions that changed his mindset, of a slow journey of reconstruction and impact. Each word was a brick on a path back to dignity. And in that moment, the teacher understood that the gesture of sharing her lunch with that boy had touched not only the child, but also the father's heart. It was as if, by feeding her son, she had rekindled in him the certainty that there was still kindness in the world, that there were still people capable of caring without expecting anything in return. This unexpected revelation profoundly affected the teacher. The man before her wasn't just someone in a difficult situation. He was living proof that life can surprise, that even amidst ruins, there is always room for a new chance. And as his words unfolded, she realized this wasn't just a conversation. It was an exchange of souls, Her father exposed his wounds, but also showed the scars as signs of transformation. The teacher, in turn, found herself challenged to see beyond appearances, to understand that every human being carries within them hidden truths that can change the course of any journey. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this revelation not only impacted the teacher, but raised universal questions about who we are, about the behind-the-scenes aspects of life that rarely surface, and about how seemingly simple encounters can carry the power to transform destinies. The classroom was no longer just a learning space. It was now a silent stage where lives intertwined in unexpected ways. Her father's revelation had broken down invisible walls and built a bridge of understanding no one could have anticipated. The teacher, who until then believed she was merely fulfilling her role of teaching and caring, found herself facing something much greater, the realization that every act of kindness, even the simplest, can have an impact capable of changing entire lives. She began to look at herself with a new mindset, realizing that her life, marked by sacrifice and hardship, was also being transformed by this turn of events. The seemingly small gesture, sharing a plate of food, now revealed itself as the trigger for a profound transformation. The boy's father wasn't just someone who needed to be thanked. He was a reflection of how many lives can be redefined when someone chooses to act with empathy. The impact of that moment spread in invisible waves, crossing the barrier of the obvious and revealing hidden truths about the power of compassion. The teacher understood in that instant that her own journey was taking on new meaning, and that this child carried with him not only a needy gaze, but also the seed of a change she herself needed. The room was filled with a dense silence, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than words, that reveals what lies hidden behind the scenes of life. With every breath, the teacher felt the weight and at the same time, the lightness of that revelation. This wasn't just a meeting between student, parent, and teacher. It was living proof that simple decisions can illuminate entire paths, that the hidden truth behind every face holds stories of struggle, falls, and new beginnings. She knew she wouldn't emerge from it the same person. That revelation had laid bare a universal truth. No matter how hard life is, full of limitations and pain, there are still moments that restore faith in humanity and rekindle hope. The impact wasn't limited to that day, but became a turning point in how she viewed her profession, her mission, and her very existence. Suddenly, everything that seemed small took on grand proportions, and everything that seemed lost became an opportunity for a new beginning. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this turn of events not only marked a turning point in the teacher's life, but also leads us to reflect on how each choice we make can become a guiding thread of transformation in someone else's life, and even in our own. And that's how this story ends. But the message it carries continues to resonate within us. If at any point this video spoke to your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel to continue following stories like this, which remind us of the power of a simple gesture. And since you've made it this far, leave the phrase, "I'm with you until the end" in the comments, just so I know we're together until the very end. Your like also makes all the difference, because it shows that this type of content deserves to reach even more people. And look, it doesn't stop there. There's a video right here that complements this topic and will make you reflect even more. Click and stay with me there.